Hello, everyone. My name is Madeline Milner, and I'm the Area Rangeland Management Specialist for the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, California, Area 4. And I'm here to talk today about fire, wildlife, and grazing, how NRCS can support your management goals. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, I'm going to take a minute to sort of introduce you to our origins and how we were formed. On April 27, 1935, Congress passed Public Law 74-46, in which it recognized that the wastage of soil and moisture resources on farm, grazing, and forest lands is a menace to national welfare, and it directed the then Secretary of Agriculture to establish the Soil Conservation Service as a permanent agency in the USDA. In 1994, Congress changed the SCS's name to the Natural Resource Conservation Service to better reflect the broadened scope of the agency's concerns. And if you look at the photos on the slide, in the left-hand side, there is a classic photo taken in 1935 of some farm fields during what is known as the Dust Bowl. And on the right-hand side, we have a picture of Dr. Hugh Hammond Bennett, who is known as the father of soil conservation and the first chief of NRCS. This picture was taken in 1943, and he's standing in a farm field during the Dust Bowl. So what does NRCS offer farmers and ranchers today? NRCS offers financial and technical assistance through conservation practices, activities, and enhancements to help agricultural producers make and maintain improvements on their land and their agricultural operations. We work with farmers and ranchers to identify resource concerns related to water and air quality, conserving ground and surface water, improving soil health, and enhancing wildlife habitat, among other natural resource priorities. Locally based staff work directly with farmers and ranchers to develop conservation plans that include design, layout, construction, management, operation, and maintenance of conservation practices. In most counties in the United States, you can find a Natural Resource Conservation Service field office or service center that can have a variety of staff from a variety of backgrounds such as soil science, rangeland management, agronomy, agricultural engineering, or even wildlife biology that work together to meet the needs of the clients in their local service area. All participation with NRCS, whether it is participating in completely free certified technical assistance or participating in our financial assistance programs, is completely voluntary. NRCS is a non-regulatory agency. I'm going to start talking about some of the common resource concerns and issues that we at NRCS will hear from some of our livestock producers in Southern California. Some of the current problems I've got listed on the left-hand side of the screen, such as my property has the wrong kind of plants. Typically, people will come to us and say that they would like to encourage the growth of more perennial grasses versus annual grasses, or more herbaceous understory rather than shrubby, hard brush overstory. Sometimes they have to supplement alfalfa all year round. Sometimes, due to lack of water or fences, they can't get their livestock to graze their entire property, so they are wasting feed. Sometimes they have issues with invasive plants or weeds, and sometimes they're just not sure how many animals their property can carry. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see some of what we call conservation practices that can help address some of these concerns, such as range seeding, where we could seed a mix of native and introduced species that will meet the goals of the producer, such as to increase forage value for their livestock. We can help people install fencing. We can assist in constructing livestock shelter structures to protect them from intense heat. We can do a variety of practices to create livestock watering facilities by installing and cost sharing for troughs, storage tanks, livestock pipeline, solar pumps, wells, and developing springs. We can deal with weeds or other invasive species through a variety of means, such as chemical or mechanical, depending on the preference of the landowner or what is appropriate for that site. And we can also help them develop a prescribed grazing plan that can bring all of these different resource concerns and associated practices together. In this slide, I've included a picture of a pasture that I visited recently in San Bernardino County. And as you can see, this pasture has been used a little intensely, I would say. They didn't get very good grass production this year. They've got kind of an unacceptable amount of livestock trailing and some bare patches. And I was surprised to hear that this pasture actually only carries 40 head of sheep, but the sheep are continuously grazed and the pasture never gets any rest. And this had been the typical procedure for almost the last decade. So you can see the result of not implementing any type of practices. And now the property owner is forced to supplement feed hay almost all year long. And then going into a drought year, they have basically no backup feed. So they know they're going to have to buy alfalfa all year. So that was why they reached out to us to talk about some ways that they could improve this pasture so that it could carry the herd or possibly even a little bit more sheep in the future without them having to constantly be feeding on top of that. In this slide, I'm actually highlighting an employee of your local service center in San Diego County. This is a soil conservationist by the name of Axel Sanchez, who has a range degree from Humboldt University. And what he's doing in this photo is that he's going out and he's doing some clipping and weighing of vegetation so that he can give the producers some base AUM numbers. They haven't started grazing here yet, and they wanted to get some advice on what they should set their initial stocking rate. So this is an example of some of the services that NRCS service centers can provide to ranchers. The Axel, after he did these clippings and weighings, he went back and calculated the carrying capacity or the animal unit months for the property and gave them back to the producers so that they could stock the property at an appropriate rate that wouldn't overuse it at the beginning of the season. Next, I'd like to talk about some resource concerns that are related to wildfire fuel loads. This is a big concern for us in Southern California, obviously, and many of the concerns that I will hear from my producers are related to things like brushy or shrubby plants have dominated my ranch. They're creating too much fuel, too much woody litter is gathering around them, and I'm not sure what to do. In some places, the invasive annual grasses have created too many flashy fuels. Or in some cases, if somebody owns a forested property, or perhaps they have a Forest Service grazing lease, and they see an excessive number of dead trees, fallen logs, or ladder fuels, they'll come to us and want to talk about ways that they can sort of mitigate those fuel loads. So we can offer a variety of things to help reduce wildfire fuels. We can cost share on both mechanical and chemical brush thinning treatments. We can financially support using targeted grazing with goats and sheep to reduce fuel loads or reduce populations of weedy or invasive species. We can come back with follow-up treatments after reducing the undesirable species and seed with the preferred species so that they can better take advantage of that open rain and sun that becomes available after the woody species are knocked back. And for our forestry owners, we actually have trained forestry staff that can do complete forest inventories and come up with recommendations for appropriate stockings for your property, and then the associated practices such as woody residue treatment or tree thinning to get you to a healthier stocking rate. And we can cost share on things like fuel break and fire lines to improve your safety from wildfire threats. This photo is taken on a ranch of a client in mine in Los Angeles County. And as you can see, there is essentially impenetrable brush of a variety of different species. You can see a pile of dead woody litter there on the bottom. So this is obviously a pretty risky fuel load in a county that is prone to annual wildfires anyway. So this is a situation where we came in and we have cost shared for some mechanical brush thinning to help kind of break this up and knock this down. And then we're also going to financially support implementing prescribed grazing after the brush thinning so that they can use their livestock to eat some of the regrowth from the shrubs to help them not come back as aggressively. And then after the prescribed grazing is used to treat some of the resprouts, we may even come back and try a seeding practice to encourage more of the desirable understory that we're looking for. The last resource concern I'm going to discuss in this presentation is the declining wildlife habitat. When we work with farmers and ranchers, we often find that they don't know or have any awareness of what threatened or endangered species may be or have been present on their property. If they do know of a species that they're concerned about, such as the southwestern willow flycatcher, they may not know if they have the appropriate vegetation community to provide habitat. Sometimes if they have a stream or a pond, they may know they have a riparian property and they know they want it to function properly, but they also are using it for livestock water. So they're not sure how to enhance the habitat while meeting the livestock water needs. And they may not know if there is any viable habitat left on their property at all. And something great that we offer is services from trained wildlife biology staff, such as species review maps that show recorded species on your property, and then actual surveys of birds or reptiles can be provided by the biologist by request. We can provide practices that cost share on wildlife planting, constructing wildlife structures for cover, and even wildlife-friendly livestock fences. When it comes to riparian areas, we can offer things like access control, provide alternative water development for the livestock so that these natural water areas cease to be a priority for the watering strategy. We can provide riparian species planting, and we can even use fences to keep livestock out of riparian areas during these sensitive times, such as the summer. Again, if that is something that a rancher is interested in doing. And then as we implement these practices, we can assist in habitat quality evaluation and how to monitor those habitats to see if the improvements are actually resulting in increased use by the species of concern. This is a picture of a sub-irrigated pasture that has a riparian area running through it in Kern County, California. And this is one of those situations where the pasture was in pretty good shape because it's perennially wet. They can rely on this to have good forage year in, year out, no matter what the annual precipitation. But because it's such a wet pasture, they've also relied on it as livestock water. And as you can see, the livestock have essentially free use of the riparian area, and we're not seeing a ton of cover from trees or willows or these taller species. So this is a situation where we're working with the producer to develop some off-site livestock water facilities so that they can pull the cows off of the stream during the sensitive times, and we can come in and plant some native species to create better habitat for some species of concern in the area, such as the southwestern willow flycatcher. So what is it that allows us to provide the assistance on all these wonderful improvements? Well, as I mentioned before, the Natural Resource Conservation Service can provide 100% free technical assistance for any producer at any time. But if you're interested in using our technical assistance and applying for financial assistance, then one of the ways that we do that is through the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. In shorthand, we often refer to it as EQIP. And if you're interested in participating in EQIP or learning more about it, I'm going to briefly kind of walk through the steps of how you would go about that. First, you would visit your local service center. You should be able to find one in every county of the United States. And once you get introduced, you would work with your local service center to develop what we call a conservation plan. And on that plan, you would outline your goals as a producer, and you would work with that natural resource staff to identify resource concerns that exist at your property. And depending on the resource concerns that are identified, you can consult with discipline experts such as rangeland management specialists, wildlife biologists, engineers, soil scientists, or foresters, just to name a few. And then after you've identified the resource concerns, you would select the practices that would allow you to treat both the resource concerns and help you to achieve your goals. So once the plan is designed, you can choose to implement it completely on your own, or you can choose to apply for financial assistance to do so. So all of the plans are competitively ranked based on local resource concerns and the amount of conservation benefit that's provided and the need of the applicants. If your plan is selected for funding, you can choose to sign on to a conservation contract and then implement the plan. Now I'd like to talk about what I think is an example of a successful partnership between the Natural Resource Conservation Service and a rancher who is participating in the CDFA Healthy Soil Grant Program. In this picture, you'll see Mike Williams, who runs the Diamond W Cattle Company and is the president of the Los Angeles chapter of the California Cattlemen's Association. This picture was taken on a field visit where right in the middle he had to jump out of the truck and go check on one of his water systems. So this is my favorite picture I've ever taken of him. I hope he's okay with me sharing this one. So Mike applied for and received one of the Healthy Soils grants to implement prescribed grazing on his 5,000-acre ranch lease in Los Angeles County. So he came to the local NRCS Service Center, which happens to be the one that I personally sit in the city of Lancaster, and was requesting support on how to design and implement the prescribed grazing in a way that would comply with the grant requirements and allow him to meet his goals for the property. So how could NRCS help him? In building our conservation plan and our successful partnership with Mike Williams, the first thing we did was outline what his goals for the property were. So he wanted to rest some of the overused areas and promote more grass growth. He wanted to provide more water on the ranch so that he could better distribute his animals throughout the 5,000 acres. He wanted to implement a rotational grazing schedule, and he wanted to encourage the growth of native perennial grasses. So these are some of the ways that NRCS has both financially and technically supported him in achieving his goals. So a range specialist came out with him and provided vegetation measurements to help guide his annual stocking rates and comply with the CDFA grant. Using the EQIP program, we were able to cost share on the development of livestock troughs, storage tanks, pipelines, and spring developments so that he could increase the available water on the ranch. We were able to go and remove 20, 30-year-old fences from previous owners that impaired both livestock and wildlife movement. And we were able to build new plans that fit Mike's prescribed grazing strategy. And we also assisted in developing a grazing management and monitoring plan that would allow him to satisfy the CDFA requirements. This set of photos was taken on the same place on Mike's ranch, but 2 years apart. And you can see in the photo on the left-hand side, which was taken in the fall of 2018, that the residual dry matter level was below what acceptable levels would be, and the bare ground percentage is high. You can see from the amount of cow patties that this is an area that was getting heavy used, which made sense because in 2018, this was the only place that he had livestock water. So on the right-hand side, we're looking at the same point 2 years later after him being able to develop more livestock water throughout the property and also putting in his prescribed grazing management plan. And you can see the RDM level has dramatically increased and the amount of bare ground has decreased. So he definitely saw some positive returns in one of the most sensitive spots on the property. And that's actually myself in that photo. And I left that in so that you could see one of the services that the field office is giving him, which is we were helped him design and implement his monitoring strategy, both so that he can satisfy the terms of the grant and also so that he can make informed management decisions in the future. And with that, I am going to end my presentation by providing you with a few additional resources. The first one is a YouTube playlist that's called Conservation at Work, and it consists of a variety of very short, sort of a 1 to 2 minute videos that highlight individual practices that the NRCS offers. Now, it is just a limited selection since we do cost share on over 100 practices, but I encourage you to check it out if you're interested. I've also got a link to the California NRCS website. Here I have got the contact information for your local San Diego field office in Escondido, and the district conservationist or the supervisor of that office goes by the name of Raul Alvarado, and the soil conservationists are Celine Morales and Axel Sanchez, who you saw earlier in the presentation. And Mike Williams has also graciously allowed me to share his contact information, which you can see his phone number in his email, and told me he would be happy to answer any questions from any ranchers in San Diego County who were looking for some assistance. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and thank you for being able to be a part of the event today.